So I'm very happy that
Okay.
I can talk to Ayesha today, from the founder from Remake. And now the video paused. Do you still hear me? Do you still hear me? Oh, hello?
Oh, I'm right here. I lost
Okay,
you for a
so
second. Hopefully it doesn't
okay,
do
let's
that.
start again. So yeah, I'm talking to Ayesha, the founder of the nonprofit organization Remake. And to start the interview, I would like to ask you if you could say a few words about your background and about Remake, so that people know why I wanted to talk with you so bad for the interview.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. So, my name is Ayesha. I'm the founder of Remake. I've spent the last 15 years really focused on the sustainable fashion industry. My background is I first started working at a large consultancy,
Hmm.
Business for Social Responsibility, that worked with brands and retailers on essentially making the business case and embedding sustainable practices
Hmm.
into their core business. So, I worked with a lot of luxury brands as well as mass market retailers,
Hmm.
H&M, Forever 21, Walmart,
Everyone.
Target. So
Hmm.
really got an understanding from the inside of the
Hmm.
industry. I then went on to work with the ILO, which is a part of the UN system.
Hmm.
And what we did there through a project called Better Work was bring government, unions, and brands to the table to address
Hmm.
working conditions. And it
Hmm.
was while I was at Better Work that probably the most defining moment of my career happened, because
Hmm.
Rana Plaza
Hmm.
fell down. It was, 5 years ago now. And one thing that I realized was that in many ways, the sense of urgency that I felt from a
Hmm.
natural depletion standpoint, from thinking of about fashion's impact on waste and water and
Hmm.
human lives, particularly women's bodies, that emergency was not really being felt in
Hmm.
in the sustainable fashion conversation.
Hmm.
And I believe that what we needed was a groundswell of emerging designers and everyday millennial shoppers to really
Hmm.
rise up and
Hmm.
make this industry a force for good. And so we founded Remake 3 years ago. We are
Mm.
unabashedly a for women by women
Mhm.
organization, a nonprofit
Mhm.
that's really focused on doing two things. Twice a year, we do these Peace Corps like journeys. We run contests at fashion schools where we take emerging designers to communities that are on the front lines of fashion, really to understand its impact on people and the
Mhm.
planet. And then throughout the year, we do a lot of campaigning work. So, film screenings,
Mm.
swap parties, helping you discover more sustainable brands, all so that part of our Wear Your Values campaign, that
Mhm.
no matter where you are and whatever your wallet size, you can use
Mm.
your voice and your shopping dollars to help make this industry a force for good.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, you're doing a lot. And also the campaigns are always great. It's very inspiring to see you do your work. Um Now, my first question would be,
Mm.
if you could, I know it's a broad topic and sometimes it's hard, to get a quick answer or a short answer, but if you need to define the sustainability issue in the fashion industry, what are your first thoughts about it? Like, what does sustainability in fashion mean to you?
Absolutely. So, sustainability to me means putting people and the planet at the center.
Mm-hmm.
If you just want one succinct answer, I think often it's an afterthought. I think often what we do within the industry is to balance people, planet, and profit as if it's
Mm.
a perfect equilibrium. But the
Mm-hmm.
truth is, the volume of consumption and where we are today, and how disposable clothing has become, we simply cannot sustain these consumption
Mm-hmm.
habits. And so, when I think about sustainability, I also think of intersectionality. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people either talk about it from an environmental lens or a human
Mm-hmm.
rights lens, but the truth is that the two are completely connected.
Mm.
The frontline workers who are up against fashion's bad behavior from a health and safety standpoint, the women in Phnom Penh or in Dhaka, are
Mm-hmm.
also the same workers who will be in the front lines of climate's impact
Mm.
and the lack of access to clean water. And so it really is that connective tissue of, if we were to design and consume in a way that puts people and planet first, that to me is what a truly sustainable industry is.
And I mean, the debate about sustainability has really like constantly increased, like especially throughout the last 3 or 4 years. I would say the topic is on like very present everywhere. But do you think there's still an aspect missing in that within that debate of sustainable fashion, and what would you think it is?
Yes, I think there's a lot missing in the
Yeah.
debate. First of all, it's very heartening. It's a term that I think 60% more people have searched over the last year. Whether it's sitting where you are in Germany or thinking here in the United States, there is a deeper interest. But I think there's two things that are really missing from the conversation. The first is really hearing from the frontline communities themselves. And this is something, as you know, that we do a lot of through our short form documentaries, through our photo rich stories. It's interesting to me how non-diverse the sustainable fashion spaces are, even though it's an industry that's built on the oppression of Black and brown bodies, right? It's women who are on the front lines of fashion's bad behavior, and yet they're not represented. I think a lot of what we're often looking for are these silver bullet solutions. Blockchain will fix it, circularity will fix it, as opposed to really hearing from the people and from the communities that where we dump our clothes, where the landfills are sitting, where the factories are collapsing. So I think first and foremost, making this a more inclusive dialogue that really leads with the people who are impacted by fashion is missing. I think the second is, this is something that we hear a lot about what people profess to say they do versus what they actually do. And so what I mean by this is there's a survey bias, right? Everyday shoppers, if you ask them, they'll say, of course I'll buy sustainable. But, when the research becomes difficult, we are in these busy lives. We're used to, through Amazon, everything arriving within 1 day of shipping. Also with wages shrinking, it's hard for people to actually put their money where their mouth is. And so we really think of our movement as a way to be very welcoming and not exclusionary. Meet you where you are and realize that it's big and little ways that you can be a part of the solution. So I think, we still are missing this actual data around buying behavior. I think there's some early bright spots of sustainable brands that have done really well, but we need more of that to show that this is actually a viable industry and a way that people really do want to shop their values.
So, given that, considering the complexity of the system, what would you say has priority in shifting things? Is it really you're trying with your organization, you're really trying to educate the consumers? So would you say that this is like the first step, right, that needs to be taken right now towards sustainability, or are there other things that you feel are just equally important?
Look, I think for complex, wicked problems, we need all of it, right? And I think sometimes we within the movement do ourselves a disservice by essentially wringing our hands and saying, it's not working, we need this. And so essentially what happens is, the manufacturers in countries will say, we're against, pressure of delivery and price. We can't fix it. Government will fix it. And it's like, oh, well, policy change is really difficult. And, we're sitting across a lot of corrupt government. Investors will fix it. It's like, oh, well, investors only care about quarterly or quarter pressure. So who knows if they'll fix it? And essentially all this finger pointing 20 years later with the sort of staggering consumption patterns, offshore production has made very little inroads. So I really like to think about what can be done first and foremost in terms of the individual, and then depending on where you sit, how you can use your spheres of influence. So for an everyday shopper, it's simple things like wash your clothes in cold water, guys. You could really do that. Don't wash so much. Think about the 30-day rule. If you're not going to wear something for 30 days, don't wear it. Could consignment, rental, vintage be an option for you? There are sustainable brands. They last longer. If you must buy something, can you buy from them? Can you use your advocacy voice when you are on Instagram and Twitter so much to essentially ask brands more difficult questions? So I do think a groundswell of sustained interest from customers is a very important piece of the puzzle, but I wouldn't say that it trumps or comes over important gains in policy or enforcement or what have you. I think the short answer is we need all of it. I think what we are really trying to do is focused on the consumer. And our long-term bet with some of our Peace Corps-like journeys is essentially to see the next generation of designers to also design with intention.
So, and also because usually I ask my interview partners if they think, that consumers actually do have the power to drive change. But since you obviously believe in that, I want to ask you actually another question, and that one is of a lot of interest for me, because that's actually where I'm trying to push my project towards, and that is how, since consumers do have power, but how do we get them to be aware of that power, and how do we make sure that they also use it, with their buying decisions? And given your experience, what would you say, how can we educate consumers in that way? Like, how do we invite them to participate with their power?
Absolutely. So I think it's two things. I think, some of us as activists in this movement have in many ways failed consumers. Historically, the conversation has been very doom or gloom, horrific images of tragedies, sweatshops. It's things that we all know. But very much we've internalized in the deep recesses of our minds, but we don't know what to do about it. I think one of the reasons that we consider the movement hasn't moved as much is in the way that the story has been told. We are very much a brand of hope and inspiration. The women that we meet and whose lives we bring back are strong and resilient and hardworking. And so one of the things that I think the way to move the consumer conversation forward is for us to see ourselves in her narrative, to see that the end maker and we are sisters in the supply chain in the same fight. We're up against the same things: equal pay for equal work, raising a family and going to work, dealing with endemic cases of sexual harassment and violence. And empathy, I think, is a much more sustained force than sympathy. And so the very way that we tell the stories need to be less colonial, less, oh my God, we have to rescue these poor people far away, and to say, she's rising up to fight, and so should I. So I think that's first and foremost. And then the second is making it really actionable, right? We vet brands, as you know, on our platform. We know this is more an art than a science, but think of us as sort of almost a Greenpeace for fashion, right? It's how do we look at all the marketing, the greenwashing, the data coming at us and say, these are better brands and these are not. Because people at the end of the day just want that A and B choice of what are the more sustainable brands. If I must buy, I just need somewhere to go and make that happen. And so, the way that we're really trying to disrupt this conversation is, one, tell the story differently. Let her tell her story for herself. And two, make the discovery of sustainable fashion lifestyle easier and more joyful.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was actually already it. And
I have one final thought for you, which I think one of the things we're realizing is that the sustainable fashion lifestyle can be quite lonely. It can be quite othering. And so one of the things that our ambassador community, we launched an ambassador network in November. We're now 125 women strong globally, all over the world. And one of the things we were all craving is just that community and support. Setting goals together with each other and feeling like we're a part of that sisterhood.
It's on the one side, I don't know, on the one side it's a very complex topic. On the other side, it's not even that complex if you start having these conversations, I feel like. Because as soon as you start the conversation and be transparent, that's actually what I realized, because I always felt very I love fashion and I love what I do, but I have a lot of struggle with the industry. And coming from Germany, also, that's not really like a very fashion country. Sorry to all Germans, but I felt like, where do I find my place in the industry? But now that, since I started my project and tried to discover more and more about it, and also try to make the process of my learning visible, I'm actually surprised how many people are also willing to talk to me that I wouldn't think that would actually even reply to my emails asking, to have a conversation.
There's a camaraderie and a kindness. And we found that too. if you're up for it, our presence in Europe is definitely growing. We'd love for you to come on as an ambassador. And what I've noticed through our Google group, we only meet once a month for 30 minutes, but it's very much from a place of how can I help you? And sort of recognizing that the big ship that is our industry is moving in a completely different direction than our value system. And it's how do we support one another, whether it's those who are wanting to create more sustainable brands, those who are wanting to use more of their marketing voice to market these brands, or those who are just trying to make it a lifestyle shift in the everyday life, because it can be quite lonely, right? It's like, I don't know where to shop, or I still want to look fabulous.
And also as someone who's making fashion, it can be lonely too, but but I'm surprised about all the positive feedbacks and answers that I got, so I'm really looking forward to continue this journey, actually. And also for me, it's just such a good reason to talk to the people that I find interesting, and get some...
same. This is the best part of my day, so I would love when the project is ready or you have more to share, you have my email, let me know.
That's
and
great.
For us to be supportive in sharing it with our community.
That would be so great. Okay, thank you so much. Did I pronounce your name wrong? You said Ayesha?
Ayesha.
Ayesha. Okay, Ayesha. Thank you so much, Ayesha. And I'm looking forward to show you the project when it's done,
I'm delighted. Yeah, please do share it on.
Okay, so have a nice day and talk to you soon, okay?
You.
Bye.
Sounds good. Enjoy your evening. Bye.